one of the top stories today are bosses at Britain's biggest companies. They earn about 118 times more than a typical UK worker. And now what's happened is that looking at the ftse 100 bosses, they've had pay rises on average, Ben, of about 16%. So a lot of people are now coming out saying this is basically all wrong. You need to have more pay equality. Perhaps you need to put workers on boards and all the rest of it. Where do you stand?
Well, there's nothing new about ftse 100 CEOs being overpaid. It's an issue I've had all my adult life, actually.
You know, being massively overpaid?
Well, the ftse, I've had an issue with the ftse 100
There's worse
CEOs.
Problems, Ben. Go on, sorry,
I've had issues with the ftse 100 CEOs because when you run a company which is in the ftse 100, you're running a massive company, a company which has a kind of path on which it will go. I'm not saying the CEOs don't influence it, but it's a path that is governed by lots of different directors, lots of different departments, and it's a powerhouse. And in my experience over the 30-odd years I've been in business, these people, the CEOs, add very little value and often fail.
Really?
And they get paid to fail. They have fantastic contracts. They get golden handshakes on the way in, golden parachutes on the way out, and then they go and find another unsuspecting ftse 100 company on which to perpetrate their failed governance. So I'm not a fan of ftse 100 company CEOs, and this is a statistic from those CEOs. The argument they would make is obviously that they believe in themselves and that they wouldn't come to this country and run these companies if they weren't paid well. But there's a flip side to that, and it's that we are completely overtaxed. If we want to stop the brain drain, if we want to attract people into the country, it's not just a matter of paying them properly. It's a matter of ensuring that once they've been paid, they retain what it is that they've earned. And that applies equally to ftse 100 CEOs as it does to any other CEO, any other director, any other manager, any other worker in any other part of the economy. And I'm digressing, but it's a really important point. Last year, we lost 500,000 British citizens, young British citizens, leaving the country. We took in 1 million foreigners. We had net inward migration of 600,000. And the people that left because the aspiration is being killed in this country. That doesn't come by overpaying people. You create aspiration by allowing them to keep more of what they earn. And we've got to go back to that. So I would have rather have seen ftse 100 company CEOs have their tax rate cut, but not get the kind of promotion, the increment in salary.
Well, if anyone is out there aspiring to be a ftse 100 boss, they're probably sitting there now crying because Ben's basically saying that a load of them are rubbish and not worth the cash anyway. But, Jo, your thoughts?
Well, I agree with Ben. I mean, these figures are absolutely eye-watering. The highest paid in this list is Sir Pascal Soriot, who's the boss of AstraZeneca, £15.3 million a year. Now, I mean, that is just beyond any of our imaginations.
And the drive for AstraZeneca comes from its research department.
Precisely.
Not the CEO.
No, exactly. And I think, you know, Ben's absolutely right. CEOs in most companies are a figurehead that does nothing, but it is the reward for failure. And I'm not for 1 minute saying that AstraZeneca is a failing company. But when you look at the salaries much lower than these, but of the water company executives, for instance, who are pumping absolute crap, literally, into our seas and rivers, who are rewarded for failure. And it's this convoluted thing of the salary, the shares, the pensions, the credits and everything else. What's interesting is that the gap between the median pay, which is around £33,000 a year, is 118 times to the top earners. That's way up on 2021 when it was 84 times the difference. So the gap between has got bigger. And I think, you know, why are we paying people who are just figureheads? There's a huge difference if you take somebody like James Dyson or Richard Branson or those people who have started something, built it up, created it. You know, maybe they don't have the same day-to-day, but it's very much their image.
Yeah, I mean, ftse 100, just to be clear, ftse 100 CEOs are a particular class of their own.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about that class of CEO when I'm, you know, slightly disparaging about them.
Yeah, and I would, you know, I'm going to come out on the side of the CEOs, I've got to say. I know, because you surprised me. I thought you'd be on the side of big business and all the rest of it.
I'm not on the side of big business. I'm on the side of small business, disruptors, businesses that wish to grow. entrepreneurs. I want people to have aspiration, ambition and desire to get on in life.
But the FTSE 100 as well is a key component, isn't it, in terms of, I don't know, people's pension portfolios and all the rest of it. A lot of people's pensions will be invested in the FTSE 100, as an example. So all of us collectively, you need those companies to grow and prosper in order for you to have a nice time when you reach retirement.
Except some of us might be thinking, actually, I don't agree with that person getting that much money.
But it's a competitive market,
And
though,
they
isn't
don't
it? And
run
ultimately,
the companies that well. That's the point I'm making.
But that's a different conversation, and that is about how are you incentivising people, what are the contracts that you're putting in place. But ultimately, to be a CEO of a FTSE 100 company, you're going to have to sacrifice huge amounts of your life. You're going to have to be on a very kind of focused, lockdown path where literally your career is absolutely everything to you. You mentioned people like Branson and things like that, who I admire hugely, but being an entrepreneur and starting something, that's a very different skill set to being a CEO and taking a going concern and continuing growing and developing that.
But I think that's...
Am I doing a good job, by the way,
I think
defending the fact
No, you see, I think that's exactly the point that Ben was making, that they're not people who've come in with imagination and are driving it forward. They are simply figureheads who turn up at board meetings because the real work, AstraZeneca, for instance, it's about research, it's about science, it's not about...
But hang on, but who defines that direction of travel, then? You're saying it's about
No, I'm not saying they're without
science.
purpose. I'm not saying they're without purpose.
But they're not the most important. The company would exist without them.
Yeah,
No, a company wouldn't exist without a CEO.
No, my empirical evidence
Hang on, no, because it's a very important point. Joe is saying that a company would exist. Yeah, Joe is saying, I corrected myself, Joe is saying that a company would exist without a CEO. That's nonsense. How can a massive organisation, in some cases an international organisation with thousands of employees, how are you telling me that that can exist without a CEO?
Well, a CEO that doesn't need to be paid this much money, for sure.
Well, if I was a CEO, I'd be trying to get every single penny I could get, wouldn't you?
I just want to reiterate, so my target is the CEOs of FTSE 100 companies, not CEOs
Yes, look at him backtracking now.
No, not backtracking,
but we are
started.
talking about this really, these are like the, they're the Lionel Messis of business, aren't they? They're up there in the stratosphere.
And good on them, by the way. Good on them. If you've dedicated yourself to getting to the top of your business game, then fair play to you. Don't you deserve the spoils? Don't you deserve it all?
But I don't think
I don't think they're at the top of their game.
Well, do you? Do you work for one of these FTSE
Is there one out there?
Do you work for one of these FTSE companies? Do you sit there and look at your CEO misty-eyed thinking, if only I could be as good as them? Or do you sit there thinking, how on God's green earth has that person got the job? I don't know. You get in touch and you tell me. GB Views at GB News, GB Views at gbnews.com.